What makes a human human? How much flesh must you replace with machine before you can no longer call yourself such? What about things like humanity, consciousness, agency? When does the fusion of Stin and— oh my god, okay, wow. I guess the philosophical stuff's getting saved for the sequel then. It has been 2 years since I last reviewed a game, and there hasn't really been any one reason as to why. There have been a few games in that time I wanted to talk about for sure, but there hasn't been any real inspiration to fuel the want to write a script. Or, on the odd occasion a script has been done and recorded, my ability, or lack thereof, to edit made me feel like I couldn't properly convey what I wanted to say or show. And while there was always the option to just talk over some gameplay, I didn't want to take the easy way out again. Just as the Ghostrunner rose from a 20-year dirt nap to save Dharma City from the evil clutches of Mara the Keymaster, a video rises from my projects folder after a 2-year hiatus of me saying, I'll get one done this weekend, I promise. And as you'll probably agree with me, they're about equal in scope. 2020's Ghostrunner is set in a dystopian megastructure called Dharma City, an absolutely colossal tower purpose-built to hold 1 million humans after a mysterious world-ending event known as the Burst left the outside world barren and inhospitable. And in the years since its construction, it has become a microcosm of key figures vying for power, oppression, and rebellion. Unsurprisingly, not everyone in this million-strong population appreciated being ruled over by one man who was becoming more and more of an authoritarian as the years passed. It got to the point where some of them even began to rebel. And from this rebellion, Adam, alongside his colleague and lover Mara, would go on to create the Ghostrunners, humans born in a lab and fused with cybernetic enhancements from birth to become unstoppable killing machines. They could be anything ranging from law enforcement and peacekeeping, bodyguards, and even carrying out some wet work jobs like assassination. Adam and Mara found themselves at odds over their ideologies. Adam wanted to keep humanity in Dharma and to employ and enforce a very strict regime that would see every man, woman, and child living only to benefit the tower. Every aspect of their lives mandated to the point where you couldn't even have children unless the tower required it. Understandably, Mara took exception to this, seeing as she wanted to work towards being able to leave the tower and start rebuilding in the outside world, which sounds like a noble cause and a good reason to stand up to Adam. Unfortunately though, Mara was just as twisted as Adam, and even went as far as human experimentation on a Cronenberg level to push humanity to a stage of evolution where they could step outside. Adam, realizing his life was in danger, summoned the Ghostrunners to his side to protect him from Mara, who was now stacked with her own cybernetic enhancements. And unfortunately for them and everyone else involved except Mara, she helped create the Ghostrunners, so she was aware of and had access to a kill switch that she used to disable 99 of 100 of them. We play as that sole surviving Ghostrunner, GR74, who not 20 years before waking up for murder breakfast was involved in trying to save Adam from Mara. It seemed like he had a fighting chance until Mara activated the kill switch, ripped off his arm, and sent him through a window plummeting towards the bottom of Dharma, known as the base. Here, he was found by a rebel faction known as the Climbers, who get to work repairing GR74. And during this process, they gave him the nickname Jack, due to how badly damaged he was from the fight with Mara and the fall that left him all jacked up. The game wastes little time getting the player in control of Jack. As soon as he pulls his sword from the unsuspecting foot soldier's spinal column, you're in. The first level is a series of obstacles that explain the base mechanics of the game. Ghostrunner is a movement combat game, where your traversal skills are blended in with combat, seeing you wall run, grapple and slide around each area, dispatching enemies in a variety of gruesome ways. The real bread and butter of the combat is your sensory boost. At any point during a fight, you can jump in the air and hold the dash button to enter a bullet time-esque slow motion state that gives you incredible maneuverability in the air, allowing you to weave your way through projectiles and get around enemies and avoid attacks to deliver a killing blow. Sensory boost also has utility outside of combat during traversal segments. Say you overshoot a jump and need to course correct, you can slow down time to bring yourself back. Or if you're going for a wall run after a jump and realise your angle's a bit too steep, you can readjust slow motion mid-air and keep the momentum going that way. As you progress through the game, you'll unlock a set of skills that provide a wide range of uses. Everything from skill cooldown reductions, extra dashes, and even allowing you to deflect incoming projectiles by hitting them out of the air. And, with careful aim, you can give those projectiles the old Elvis treatment. Return to sender. Dad jokes aside, it is probably one of the most satisfying things you can do in the game. Ghostrunner absolutely nails those moments of making the player feel unstoppable. As you're parkouring around an arena, grappling to a wall run, deflecting bullets mid-air, closing in on the enemy and slicing them in half, really makes you feel like a Ghostrunner, like you're an absolute force of nature. Now, as you might expect, Ghostrunner introduces several new enemy types over the course of its campaign, each of them adding a new element to play around when you encounter them. They're all very easily distinguishable by these attack patterns, which I'm going to name for you right now. Keys will fire one shot at you every few seconds and our eyes will flash red just before they do. Triggers will fire a volley of rounds at you, so a frontal assault is never a good idea. Slugs will get you from across the map by jumping over to you and slamming on the ground. The enforcers have a shield that you need to get behind to deliver the killing blow. Mechs can fuck off. Wardens need you to deflect an attack before you can kill them. Shifters teleport around the map. Splitters split into 5 different copies of them. You have to kill the original to get the rest. And creepers will chase you around the map until they explode because they're creepy little gits and I don't like them. Whew, that was definitely the first take. The different combinations of enemy types you go against as the game progresses will definitely keep you on your toes, especially as the developers did not shy away from putting in some of the more frustrating and heavy hitting enemies in the same arenas back to back. Now, one thing you will find out very quickly is Jack dies in one hit, but so does every enemy, and thanks to an abundance of checkpoints, combat is fast and resetting after death is even faster. So you'll find yourself learning enemy placement in any given arena and finding an optimal path through the combat zone that works for you in a state of free flow violent momentum. You also gain new abilities to add to your arsenal as the game progresses. Blink allows you to line up to 3 enemies at once and cut them down in a single lightning fast motion. Tempest is a great crowd control option, allowing you to blow away multiple enemies at once. Surge is your ranged attack, allowing you to take out distant enemies with a shockwave, and Overlord is the screw you with friends now button, allowing you to make a temporary ally out of any enemy you choose, killing anything that isn't you until either the timer wears out or they're killed themselves. Admittedly, I never really used these abilities outside of a few niche moments where I remember I had them, and then used them in an arena I was struggling with. The abilities are never used in traversal and are only combat specific, which isn't an issue, but for me at least, made them feel underutilized and not really incentivized. The soundtrack to Ghostrunner is an absolute banger. The ambient tracks that play while you're exploring and making your way through these environments have a rhythm to them that makes it feel like you and the music are one when your motion is flawless. The combat tracks, as you might expect, go incredibly hard. Thick bass lines, hard-hitting kicks, and heavy synth lead even more impact to every hit you land on the enemies. The Orb is a specific favourite track of mine, which I've been listening to on repeat ever since I started playing this game. I was listening to it when I wrote the script, and I was listening to it just before I recorded this. And if I know what I'm like, I've probably put it somewhere in the video. Maybe even right here. The soundtrack is every bit as synthwavy as you would expect with a game with an aesthetic like this. You could easily imagine a long-haired man on a motorcycle riding through a wireframe valley at sunset to this music. Ghostrunner takes place over several levels in 3 key areas around Dharma. We start off at the base of Dharma, working our way through warehouses and factories, which unsurprisingly have a very heavy industrial theme to them. We then break through to Dharma City itself, where the neon lights, the endless advertising and the high-rise buildings is where that cyber synth aesthetic really starts to take hold. And I think it's a real display of how massive this mega structure is. It can fit a whole city inside of itself, with highways, train lines, everything you would need to get around a real living city. And our final push is through the labs, where Mara waits for us at the end. These once sterile environments were used to save lives and push medicine forward, and are now a staging area for Mara as she conducts her inhuman experimentation, turning the average citizen into creeps. Her monstrous creations whose sole purpose is to venture outside of Dharma and start rebuilding the world in her image. Making your way through these environments isn't as simple as walking down a corridor. There are a variety of different traversal objects, like the walls. There are billboards, slopes and rails that are placed in a way around the levels that makes them feel natural, making you feel like the path you're taking through a given area is less of a pre-arranged obstacle course and more like everything was placed organically in a living city or factory or hospital setting. Sure, there are some conveniently placed rails here and there, but to go into that is just nitpicking. Now admittedly, when I first started writing this review, it was coming from a place of hatred. I really did not enjoy my initial playthrough of Ghostrunner, and it was because of one aspect that just led to endless amounts of frustration. And that is that, at first, the enemies of this game felt very cheap and inconsistent. There were multiple occasions where I would sensory boost past an enemy or around cover or to swing around behind them, and as soon as my boost ended, they would immediately snap to me and take me out before I could react. And it got to the point where I just did not enjoy this game and finished it out of spite because it became personal. And that led to me writing the first draft of this script, which was honestly going to be my first ever purely negative review. In this rage, I went to different forum posts and discussion boards to see if anyone else was having the same issues I had, to see if they shared the same sentiment. And yeah, there absolutely was. But for every one of these posts, there was a dozen or so people replying, explaining how the enemy AI works. And once I let my pride go and started reading what they had to say, things started falling into place and I realised where I was going wrong. To my understanding of it, the enemy AI works by taking a snapshot of your last known position just before they fire, which is why if you're constantly moving, enemy attacks seem to follow and trail behind you. And if you're in a state like me where you were frustrated and trying to rush through as fast as possible, it would lead to moments where I would sensory boost way too early thinking it would save me, only to catch a bullet to the face from the enemy AI, who I've now gotten too close to, and their attack is unavoidable. Each enemy has a different attack and attack pattern. They have different cooldowns between those attacks. Learning how many projectiles they fire and when the best time to sensory boost is really will save you a lot of frustration. It'll even get to a point where you realise a lot of these attacks don't even need the sensory boost to avoid them, so you can go about your murderous killing rampage without having to slow your momentum down. It was through reading those posts and going back and experimenting that I realised I was letting my pride cloud my judgment. And going back and replaying levels multiple times, finishing the game a few times over, even going through the hardcore mode, I gained a much deeper understanding and appreciation for this game. Sure, there were still moments of frustration dying over and over again, but I wasn't calling bullshit anywhere near as much. By far, the biggest letdown for me though were the bosses. There are 3 in total, and all of them are lackluster. The first boss of the game is T073M, or Tom for short, and this is the closest Ghostrunner gets to being a rage game outside of hardcore mode. Only 38% of Steam players have beaten Tom and experienced the rest of the game, and understandably so. Having to navigate a barrage of laser beams and timing grapples to weave through or over them can feel like an insurmountable task. The second phase adds a wall running segment where you have to avoid a wave of energy running up the side, which isn't too bad on its own until you get back to the point where you now also need to dodge those lasers again. The combination of wall running and dodging those beams can be absolutely nightmarish, especially for new players who weren't expecting such a spike in difficulty. I mean, there's a reason this chapter was called the Gatekeeper, and to be honest, Tom is the strongest boss out of the 3. The other 2 bosses, being Hell and Mara the Keymaster, are incredibly easy, and I don't just mean in comparison to Tom. I mean, there are combat encounters before and after Hell and before Mara that were far more challenging to deal with. Hell's fight is just timing parries until you land a hit, which is about as hard as watching the sword blink yellow and left clicking. And while the final boss Mara was more involved introducing new mechanics as her health bar decreases, she's also the only boss on my first playthrough I died to less than 10 times. Hell isn't hard, but her stiff animations and janky timing is what really tripped me up. I just had a thought. If Mara's the Keymaster and Tom's the Gatekeeper, then is there a Gozer? Anyway, Ghostrunner was not built around prolonged one-on-one combat, and in the boss fights, it really shows. The game was built for speed and efficiency, so having that pace broken to watch Hell swing her sword in a stiff, awkward manner makes this moment feel less like 2 cyborg ninjas having some epic duel to the death, and more like 2 teenagers role-playing Kingdom Hearts 2 in a Walmart parking lot.
What'd you do with Kyrie?
She's part of the darkness now. She doesn't need the light.
You're a nobody!
Ghostrunner is a game with such a simple premise and doesn't overcomplicate itself. It knows what it is and it knows what it wants from you the player, and it gives you the tools to do so. It makes you feel like you are GR74, it makes you feel like a Ghostrunner, and from beginning to end makes you feel like an unstoppable badass. In a game with a heavy emphasis on traversal, you likely wouldn't be surprised that each level contains a slew of secrets. I mean, we're talking audio logs, lore dumps, sword skins, gloves, the whole shebang. And after you've done your first playthrough and you're looking for a bit more of a challenge, you can play through the hardcore mode, which introduces endgame enemies from level 1 and introduces new and unique stage hazards per arena to really keep you on your toes. And if that's not enough, there's 2 other challenge modes for you that help you refine and hone your speed and your combat efficiency, with a wave-based mode and a time attack mode. And honestly, if I didn't change my mindset when I finished that first playthrough, I likely never would have experienced any of that. I wouldn't have finished hardcore mode, I wouldn't have got the exclusive gloves and swords from those 2 challenge modes. So I'm really glad I gave the game a second chance and replayed it, because in the end, after all of that frustration and annoyance, what I found was a game made by developers who really were passionate about this game. This is a game that is style and substance. And over the Christmas holidays, Epic gave away Ghostrunner 2 for free, so I'm very excited to get around to playing that. I genuinely hope it's just as good, if not better, than Ghostrunner 1. But that's another video for another day, that hopefully won't take 2 years to make, but we'll play it by ear. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!